Okay, so good day to you all. I am Christian Theodore Escobido, a student of iTec 11 living in the IT era. So today I would be talking about um, Android versus iOS and which of the two is better. So this is basically a opinionated discussion wherein there is no bias, and I will be trying my best to provide no bias when comparing these two. So yes, what are Android and iOS? So these two are basically operating systems for mobile technology. And example of these are smartphones, tablets. So these operating systems are used to run these said devices, in which they are like a mini computer. They run like a computer, they do tasks like a computer, but only through a handheld device. So we have Android and iOS. So the reason why there is a comparison is that these two systems are just the same, but they differ in so many ways. So we'll be discussing it um, for this entire presentation. Okay, so let's start with the developer and initial release. So Android has various of developer, and this is because Android is an open source wherein different companies, brands use them and and sell it as their own. So like Samsung, Xiaomi, Asus, LG, and many more. And the first Android was initially released September 23, 2008. Alright, so next is iOS, which is developed by Apple. So unlike Android, iOS has a sole developer, and it was initially released July 29, 2007. To start this, yeah, to start this comparison, let us start with the customizability and the user interface. So for Android, it has limitless possibilities, and this is because when you're using Android, um, it is an open source, and when it's an open source, companies can design it any way they want. And what what makes it even more better in terms of customizability and interface is that even the user can change the design of of the Android according to your own preferences. And for the iOS, it is limited unless jailbroken. So by limited, I mean you are only stuck to what is given by the company, and what is meant by jailbroken is like you are breaking the you are you are passing by, or you are bypassing, rather you are bypassing the code within the system. So in iOS, you're only limited to what was given, and what you have is what you only have. So here, as you can see, for the interface is UI, rather, and on the left those are Androids, and on the right they are iOS. So you can see how there's a similar not similarity, I mean there's a difference between their user interface. As you can see up above their status bar, they have different designs, and you can see in Android that there is limitless designs. Unlike iOS, you would only stick to one. So nowadays, smartphones, tablets has virtual assistant, and these operating systems has also different virtual assistant. So for Android, it is Google Assistant, and for iOS is Siri. So in terms of quality, Siri was way ahead of its time to Google Assistant since Siri was released earlier than Google Assistant. It became more efficient than Google Assistant. But lately, Google Assistant has been um, flourishing. It has already been competing with Siri in terms of user user convenience. So in that are the same. Okay, so a side note for this is that I can compare the two operating systems since I have been able to use both. I was a I was an I was formerly using an Apple iOS, or yeah, an Apple or iPhone. Then I'm currently using Android. So I can really compare it because I've experienced it. So convenience. So by convenience, meaning on how does it suit the user, the needs of the user, what will be his or her purpose for that phone. So the answer is it actually depends. So the reason that it actually depends is that um, um, it an Android is basically more complex than an iPhone or an iOS since iOS Android is an open source. You can do a lot of things with it. You can access its root. By root, I mean its system files. You can have a file manager where you can manage your files, and it has apps that can't be used in iOS. Compared to Android, I mean iOS is more of a user friendly. You simply use it for sending messages. Android can still do the things that Apple can, but Apple cannot do everything, rather cannot do everything what Android can do. So because in iOS you can't use a file manager. You don't know where your downloaded files are going. You can't access the system root, but unless again if jailbroken, meaning you are bypassing its operating system. So in terms of security, you have to take into consideration the security of the phone since hackers are already rampant these days, and many many devices can be easily be hacked. And I really have to say that based on my experience, iOS security tops Android's, and and I can really say that because Android is an open source. Unlike iOS, you are limited to the the upper to what the company can give, but it doesn't mean that iOS can't be is I mean is it is totally safe because iOS tends to give updates for security reasons as well. Android gives update, but um Android is an open source, meaning it is really prone to hacking. But nowadays Android is already not that easily hackable because of its security, and its security is improving as more of its later models are coming. So one of the most um, this is one of the most high debatable topics or area of in terms of operating system. So the camera. So again, it will still depend. Okay, um, there was a time where people would compare an iPhone camera to an Android, of course, but the one they're comparing to the iPhone is would um, be a lower end model of Android since iPhone basically sells iPhone rather Apple basically sells iPhone, and iPhone doesn't come in lower versions. It just comes in one model per year or every 2 years. Unlike Android releases many models which consist of the lower end, the mid end, and the higher end. And there are times when people would compare the iPhone, which has only one type of model, to the lower end. So, of course, if you would compare the lower end to the iPhone, it iPhone would be much better in terms of quality. And you have to look at the price. You pay what you have to pay for, or you get rather what you paid for. Sorry. Then but then when you consider the comparison of the higher end to the Apple to the iPhone or iOS, they are in terms of quality, it's actually a bit similar. And the trick to getting good quality photos are actually good lighting. So here, this was the comparison that they had. And as you can see on the left, they had Android, which is probably a lower model compared to iPhone, which has only single model. So you can see the quality. There's a slight not really slight. There's a major difference, but that was done by a phone that could not match the quality of the iPhone. But if you could see the quality of higher end Androids, they can actually match what iPhone or iOS can give. So next would be hardware and performance. So when you're a user, you actually have to take into consideration the performance hardware. But not everyone is like this. There are some people who again will just look at or would be after on the camera. So some people would prefer the hardware and performance. So it still depends because again let's start with the Android. Android is an open source, so meaning it has various developers, and these developers would use different parts. So you cannot. There is no standard, or there is no single standard for the hardware of the Android. Unlike Apple, they only have one type of hardware, and that is the A series chips. And I can't really say much about the A series chips, but for Android, um, they have Qualcomm Snapdragon, one of the best processors that can compete with an A chip, which is like this, A14. So Qualcomm Snapdragon is not the only Android processor, and but Qualcomm is one of the best, and that's why I am saying it still depends because the higher model of Qualcomm Snapdragon can compete to the A series chips. And in terms of in the long run. So it really depends. So next would be my verdict. So before I would say my verdict, um, I didn't mention the other things that are really common between the two, like messaging. Um, what else? Um, it's App Store. Um, of course, affordability. It's really different, but I think it's a no-brainer on in terms of availability. So yeah, I think those are the only things that will be considered. So my final verdict would be it really depends on the user. So like me, um, I was a iOS user, but then I am a GE. Then I am a BSG student rather. Then in our course, it requires us to use a certain app that can only be found in the Play Store or in the Android store. And that's why I have to use Android. And it would be hassle if I would have an iPhone or an iOS device and another device at the same time. Then there's also a time when, not really a time, but there's also a moment when you're just here for pictures or you're just simply using phone for having a phone, do simple tasks. So you can go with iPhone. But again, the, the it would really depend on the user because Apple's or iOS devices are not that cheap, though there are cheap Android devices, but there are also price range that matches with the iOS. So again, my final verdict is it would really depend on the user. So that is all. I made this short because again it's just an opinion. I am an opinionated. Sorry. Then that is all. My resources. Thank you.